70 years ago, young Canadian men, just older than me, went overseas to answer the call of duty and to fight tyranny across Europe. To some, it was a chance to see the world and to serve their country. To others, it was a chance to be a hero and to protect their homeland. For all of them, the sacrifices and actions they made proved that freedom is not free. 70 years later, the scars still remain across these foreign lands. 70 years later, I went to visit them. I'm Sergeant Cody Lincoln from the 249 Beausejour Air Cadet Squadron. Thank you for the honor to speak tonight. We planned this trip over a year in advance. With the support of family and friends, I raised money selling more than $3,000 worth of pierogies. I counted beer cans 10 cents at a time. I really thought I made sacrifices to be able to go. I later realized it was the veterans that made the real sacrifices. On April 30th, we were off on a journey to celebrate the 70th anniversary of Victory Day, or the day that World War II ended. For me, it was the first step in a life-changing journey. We spent the first few days of our trip in England, visiting Churchill's War Bunker and the Imperial War Museum. We visited the British 249 Hailsham Air Cadets, enjoying an evening talking to them and seeing their facility. It was interesting to see how different the program is compared to how it is back in Canada. This is a picture of us with the British 249 Squadron. Yeah, we left the UK on an overnight ferry and landed in the Netherlands the next morning. The Allied forces landed in the Netherlands September 12, 1944. Our first destination was a small town of Nijmegen. I had researched how it was German occupied and bravely raided by the Canadian Airborne in Operation Market Garden. But to go there and walk through the streets was a completely different experience. I sat down at a picnic table just past the market and couldn't believe the beauty of this place on earth. The clock tower played an echoing jingle, and people rode their bicycles about. Everything was quiet and tranquil. Still sitting on that bench, I thought about what it would have been like if the town hadn't been liberated in World War II and men hadn't put their lives on the line. I pictured children begging for food as their country slowly starved to death, and Jews walking the streets bearing a yellow star emblazoned JEW. I sensed I could hear the daily Luft alarms in the distance alerting impending air attacks. In May 1940, Holland surrendered to Germany. Exactly 5 years later, in May 1945, Holland was finally liberated by the Canadian Army. When the Dutch people saw us in our uniforms, they greeted us kindly and treated us like good friends. Some told us stories about the war, and others wanted pictures with us. It was an incredible experience, and I had a small perspective of what was yet to come. Dressed in our uniforms, we went to Grosbeek to take part in Liberation Day celebrations. For the Dutch people, it was the day that their country was set free from tyranny and control. Every year, on that day, their time and respect is turned toward Canada. A small plot of land a few miles out of the town reminds them that peace is a gift given by those who died in the name of it. Grosbeek Canadian War Cemetery is the final resting place for over 2,600 Commonwealth soldiers. The Liberation Day ceremony started when the sun was still high in the sky. We stood among veterans, dignitaries, cadets, and Dutch youth in the middle of the street. The mayor of Grosbeek said a few words and set us off on a silent march up the rolling hills far past the town into the quiet fields that led toward the cemetery. There were no noises other than footsteps as we walked. We moved on through the day and watched as the sun fell slowly overhead. Feeling my boots hit the ground one step at a time made me imagine soldiers marching the same path many times before us. At the cemetery, we walked to the cenotaph. It was similar to a Remembrance Day service we have in Canada, except I felt the Dutch people have much more appreciation. Boys and girls said speeches and prayers in their honor. National anthems and the last post were played. Wreaths were laid and men were saluted. All of this they did under a flag that is not their own. Before we went on the trip, we were each assigned the name of a Manitoba soldier buried at Grosbeak. We were to research him and write a small piece about him. We went to the cemetery as the sun came up the next morning and the dew was still on the ground. The wind and the grass and the trees came as an indescribable calm as we walked along the rows to find our soldier. When I found Sergeant Kenneth Radcliffe, I placed a Canadian quarter bearing a maple leaf on his marking and said my speech. To us all, it felt like mission accomplished. I had paid my respects to just one soldier, and when I looked up and saw the immaculately manicured rows upon rows of graves and felt so proud to be Canadian, I realized that amongst that sea of crosses, there are thousands of stories to be told. We drove off into the bright new day that we were so glad to have been given. We went on to France, visiting battlefields from World War I and II scattered across the country. We visited a high hill overlooking the French fields known as Hill 145, or Vimy Ridge. It's home to one of Canada's greatest victories and proved them as a force to be reckoned with. They achieved a victory which neither British nor French were able to do, despite years of trying. The land is still left uneven and undetonated explosives scatter across the ground. I imagined a time of bombs and of bayonets, machine guns and mortars. Overlooking the land is a massive marble figure of Mother Canada, mourning the dead with her head hung low. We walked among the tombstones and hung our heads as well. The ground had been taken by the 4th Canadian Division on April 17th, and soldiers began to bury their fallen comrades soon afterward. Today, it is the resting place of almost 3,000 Commonwealth servicemen. Nearly 3/4 of them still remain unidentified. I found it hard to walk past a multitude of unknown graves, with each one engraved, a soldier of the Great War, known unto God. We went on to Beaumont Hamel, which is where the Battle of the Somme took place. Another amazing Canadian victory, which came with great losses. Many soldiers from the Maritimes came to aid the Allies during this battle. They were said to be the most hardened fighters in the war, wearing kilts as their uniforms, giving them the intimidating name of the Ladies from Hell. 800 of them were sent on an early morning raid through a gap in the barbed wire cut only a day before. The gap was too thin for such an amount of men. Within 20 yards of running out of their trench, only 40 were left to move forward. Within 20 yards, men had died on top of each other, and the 40 left had the hardest decision to decide to run back to safety or to give their lives and to try and help the cause. There were many times I cried, and I'm not ashamed. This trip has taught me that being aware of the past can greatly affect your decisions and actions for the future. I wish for everyone to have the same knowledge and attention as I do today. I think it would greatly change the way that you feel and the way that you live. In 1953, W.H. Auden wrote a famous epitaph for the unknown soldier that says, "To save your world, you asked this man to die. Would this man Could he see you now? Ask why. Do we cherish the freedom and democracy we take for granted? Do we stand up for the underdog? Do we protect peace at all costs? If that unknown soldier could see us today, would that man be proud he gave his life protecting for what we have? Or would he ask, why did I? In our last federal election, 1/4 of Canadians did not cast a ballot. When questioned why, 28% said they weren't interested, 23% said they were too busy, and 4% forgot to vote. What would have happened if when the call came out, this man had said, I'm not interested, or I don't have time? Every single Canadian, from every single generation, has a duty to honor the legacy of those who bravely answered the call to ensure we live a life of freedom and peace. We must remember, freedom is not free. Thank you.